firstly to introduce myself. My name is Daniel Harvey. I'm the artistic producer and community director for Upper Parallel. And this is the Creators Conversation, which is part of the Bullhorn community programs that we present here at Upper Parallel. We create a bunch of conversations, a bunch of events all around all of our productions, really to give the audiences, give our community a chance to go deeper into the creation of the work and the themes of each production. And so tonight we're very lucky to be joined right now by one of the two composers who will be with us as part of the Birds and Balls production. Laura Cartman will be joining us very shortly. She sadly got stuck in transit today. She was actually stuck at SFO a little earlier today on her way back to LA. But will be joining us hopefully in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so. So apologies for that. But we have the wonderful David T. Little with us, who is the composer of Winkensport, which is the first of the two pieces in the double bill for Birds and Balls. So let's give you a little introduction. David T. Little's work spans stage, concert, and screen, including renowned operas Dog Days, JFK, and Soldier Songs, which earned him one of his 2 Grammy nominations. David has been commissioned by the Kennedy Center, the New World Symphony, the Kronos Quartet, among others, and is currently under commission with the Metropolitan Opera and the Lincoln Center Theatre's New Works program, along with his regular collaborator, Royce Vavrek, who is also the librettist for Winkensport. So please welcome David Little. And I'll also give you a little bio of Laura for when she does join us, so you can get the full experience. So Laura Cartman is a prolific composer for film, TV, and the stage. Recent notable projects include the Oscar-nominated score for American Fiction, the Marvels series and Miss Marvel series for Marvel Studios, and Lovecraft Country for HBO, among many, many others. If you're like me, and once you start seeing Laura's name, you just start seeing it everywhere in every other TV show you're watching. On stage, apart from OP's upcoming premiere of her work Balls, Laura has been commissioned by the LA Opera, the Glimmerglass Festival, Lyric Opera of Kansas City, and the LA Phil. Cartman is also a fierce advocate for equity and inclusion in Hollywood, and was the first female elected as the governor of the music branch of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. So we'll welcome Laura officially very shortly when she joins us, but for now, I will throw it over to my lovely colleague and OP's General and Artistic Director, Nicole Paymore.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is one of my favorite things to do, is to have conversations with composers. As many of you know, I think that one of my favorite things in the world are composers. So it's quite a treat for me to have David here with me as a composer that I've always really, really appreciated, and I'm very, very excited to finally get to work with David, and also Laura, that will soon join us. Just a little bit of background before we start. One of the things that we are interested at Opera Parallel at times is to look at some of the shorter operas that are more difficult to program because they're too short, and we don't like to just bring 2 short opera that do not really have a relationship together. So what we try to find is works that we feel could be combined together, and we at Opera Parallel create kind of a Uber story, a story that connects the 2 works and that makes them, that enhances them because they are combining, kind of a collaboration with works, since Opera Parallel is all about collaboration. It's another way of looking at collaborations. And David and Laura both have an amazing sound world, very creative and very unique, which we thought would be a wonderful combination. It's been a wonderful collaboration with both of them, in that when we met and talked to them about this, they both agreed that they would look at the orchestration and try to combine their sound world and the orchestra the same, so that we could actually almost feel that it is, or not exactly the same, but similar, so that we would not be going from an orchestral sound world that is completely different from one works to the other. And one of the things also that was interesting in that those two works are dealing with the idea of the human condition and the impact of competition. So looking at the human condition through the lens of competition is a very unique thing in opera. And so we thought this was going to be a way for us to bring these great works together. So that's what you will be hearing when you come in, and hopefully you will come to the performance of Birds and Balls. So with that in mind, I'd like to start with David, since David is here right now. And so my first question to you, David, is that it is very interesting to have both of the opera that we are going to be doing, yours and Laura's, are based on real life events, real things that happen really, and that are also dealing with sports, which is not exactly something that we see in opera very much. So can you tell me how you landed on this story and this subject matter?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me here, and everyone in the room. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Weekend Sport started with an opportunity that Royce Fabric, the librettist, and I were given by Dawn Upshaw when she was teaching at the Bard Conservatory. She was running the vocal arts program there, and she was commissioning works for the students there. And we were given an orchestration, we were given a cast, and we were given a deadline, which, if I recall, was sooner than we were really comfortable with. It was really quick. But we were like, we can do it. We can make it work. And then we said, well, now what's it going to be? What is the story going to be? We knew it had to be some kind of an original story because there was no time to get rights for anything. And we were in the middle, actually, of working on our first full-length opera, Dog Days. And I remember saying to Royce, Dog Days is such a serious piece. Can we do something funny? I really want to do something that feels a little lighter. And so we started throwing around these ideas. And one of the ideas that Royce presented was this New York Times article about finch sitting, this Flemish sport where people sit in a row, sometimes a very long row, and count the number of times their trained finch, sings a particular song, which is called a suskuit. And I said, no, I don't like that idea. I don't want to, And fast forward a week, we've talked through a bunch of other ideas. We didn't like any of them. And I said, what about that bird one? That was kind of fun. And suddenly we were off to make this bird opera. And I don't remember if it was Royce's idea or my idea, or just through our conversations. But the idea of focusing on the trainers became really interesting to us. And what is it in them that makes them participate in this sport? The idea that the sport itself is kind of like, we kind of poke fun at it and call it a sport, during the show, because it is the least active sport I can think of in a certain way. But people get really invested in it. And there were all these examples of cheating and doping scandals. I mean, it's got it all in terms of the history of this sport. And every now and then it's sort of like, when you hear something, you'll now see it everywhere. Every year there's an article in the New York Times about finches being smuggled through JFK for this sport in the US. So it's very much an active thing. And so, yeah, we had this libretto, and it was really fun. We just got to really have fun and play. And, I have a background in musicals way back in high school as a musical theater performer. So I have been in comedies for much of my life, and it was really fun to return to that landscape. Not that it's a musical in its language, but that idea of a musical comedy was really rewarding to dig back into.
It's a very, writing comedy is very difficult and often doesn't work, especially in opera.
Yeah.
If you were working on Dog Days at the same time, which is so different and so deep and so an amazing opera, how did you manage to go from one to the other?
In a certain way,
how different was it?
In a certain way, it was exactly the same, because I think all opera is timing, whether it's comic or tragic. I think as the composer, your job is to sort of manage the passing of time for the audience and to make it feel swift and to make it feel interesting and engaging. And so in that sense, it's quite similar. And I would say another way that it was similar for me is that I always have to write, and maybe not everyone is like this, but I have to write first for myself as the audience. I have to be writing something that delights me, whether it's something very serious or something that is silly. I had to sort of, I had to make myself laugh. And Royce, I think, we had a lot of conversations where we would talk about a kind of punchline and we would both be laughing. And then I would tell my wife, and then she would laugh. And it was like, okay, this is good. Keep going in this direction. So we really got to play a lot, which was really fun. And, I should say it is a piece that has some serious things to it as well. It does get into, you mentioned the human condition, and that is a big part of I think all comedy. So.
Well, that's so true, because laughing and crying are so close, and actually, every time I'm studying the score, when we get to the area of Atticus at the end, I'm just thinking, wow, we've traveled a long distance into those characters. Atticus. Well, before we go to that, all of these trainers have names, right?
Yeah.
You have the Elton John trainer, and you have the Saint. Can you talk a little bit about that to our audience? Because I think that does describe the piece quite well.
Yeah, this was one of the most enjoyable parts about the process, is getting to invent the names of these characters. We decided that none of the characters would actually, we would never know their names, but they would be known as their birds trainers, because their whole identity is wrapped up in their birds. So we have Farinelli's trainer, Farinelli, of course, named after the great operatic castrato. We have, I'm going to forget them now. Hans Sachs trainer, named after the Meistersinger of Nuremberg. So it's full of opera in-jokes. There's a big Wagner quote that's like completely ridiculous in context, which also felt kind of fun to make Wagner a little ridiculous. Though I love Wagner. Sir Elton John's trainer, Holy St. Francis trainer, who is, St. Francis of Assisi, and she is the sort of most religious, very pious character. Prince Gabriel III of Belgium's trainer's son. So the son of the trainer of Prince Gabriel III of Belgium, which was a shout out to the Flemish origin of the sport. I mean, it's preposterous in a way,
So and then there's Atticus.
And then Atticus Finch. It's a piece about finches. We have to have an Atticus Finch, right? This was actually, I believe, a suggestion from my wife. It was like, well, you're going to have an Atticus Finch, right? We're like, oh yeah, we should totally. That's a good idea.
So when you have all these characters and they're so different in terms of the trainer, what they're training, that's Elton John or that it's Atticus. Did you plan out then? Okay. Actually, let me back up before I say that. When you were working with Royce on this, how do you work with the librettist? Do you first have him write the text and then you go, or are you at the same time sort of creating that together? Different composers have different way of working with their librettist. So tell us about that.
Usually our process is always libretto first. And usually there's a completed libretto that we'll go back and forth on for a while, and I'll give notes and make suggestions. And I also have experience as a librettist, and so I have opinions. But I also am very collaborative. So we'll find the piece. I obviously want to respect him and his autonomy as a creator in the process. And so normally there's a complete draft of a libretto, and then that's what he calls his composer or the composing draft. And then as I compose, the libretto will continue to evolve when we are like, oh, this scene, we need another scene here, or this we don't really need, we can cut this. So it evolves as I compose. And so the piece kind of tightens up as the music comes into focus. Weekend Sport, because we were on such a tight deadline, I think I was getting a new scene every day. So I was writing every morning. And then, and also I was in Australia meeting my now wife's parents for the first time while I was composing this. And I was in so much trouble for many years for doing this. I would get up really early every morning and write for like 3 or 4 hours before anybody else was awake. And then in the afternoon, when Royce was awake, because he was in Alberta, where he's from, I would get a new scene, and I would then, so it was really like quick, which also I think for writing a comedy was really good, because we didn't really have time to second guess too much. It was like, if it delighted us and it made us laugh, we went with it. And so,
how long was the whole process? How long did you take to write it?
I think we wrote it in like 4 or 5 weeks.
Wow.
It was fast. And then orchestration happened a little after, but it was.
That's fast.
It was really fast. I don't like to tell people, because I don't want people to expect me to do that again for another hour, but Yeah, it was quick.
Yeah. Well, sometimes these things can happen with, depending on that, but they don't. You want to give the time generally for works to be
Yeah.
done. Talking about that, I think our composer Laura Cartman has landed at home now. Am I right, Laura, that you're there? I'm not seeing you on my screen.
No, I am.
But
I'm home. Yeah. Hi.
I
Sorry to
see
be
you
late.
now.
Sorry to be
Hello,
late.
Laura.
Hey,
Hey,
Hi,
I'm glad
Laura.
you made. I'm glad you made it. Thanks for
thank you.
joining us.
I was just truthfully, I was flying out of the Bay Area, and the weather just delayed and delayed and delayed my flight. So I should have been home at like 1, but it was, so it's your fault. And it's that damn San Francisco airport where if there's like a drizzle, the whole thing just like completely shuts down. So that's what that's what happened. But at any rate, here I am.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad you're joining us. I'm in Dallas right now, and there was a hailstorm just about this afternoon. A rare hailstorm I've ever seen here. So it's quite amazing. But let's go to. So we introduced you while you were not there. So we'll skip the introduction if you don't mind. But one of the questions that I asked David that I wanted to ask you too is that the subject matter of these operas, doing a real life experience event and also something around sports is something that's pretty rare in opera. So I was wondering if you could tell us how it came that you chose that subject.
That's a good question. Look, you can think about this match as being about sports, but really what it was the culmination, or maybe not the culmination, but a very major point in a political movement. Yeah. And I think that's not unfamiliar to opera audiences. I think that tennis was the tool for which Billie Jean King effected massive social change. And that is something I feel very close to, mostly because I've tried to do the same thing with composing. And so it's kind of like, I really felt that was the core inspiration, because I think that we all have tools at our disposals to affect social change. And sometimes it's not about, about marching in the streets for something that you believe in, but it's about saying, okay, I can do this. How can I use this to get to some place? How can I use this to ultimately change society? So I think that's what attracted me to it, rather than the tennis aspect of it, which I love. But again, I was interested more in why or how she was able to use this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that in some ways, I often talk about that with Opera Parallèle. I mean, I feel we're using opera, that's our medium, to make a difference in this world and to bring relevant subject to the table and that. So yeah, I totally hear you with that.
And the famous example of this, of course, in opera was Marian Anderson. And the concert that she gave at the Lincoln Memorial after being denied by the Daughters of the American Revolution. So I think opera, and art has been an effective tool in social change when used wisely by artists and creators.
I totally hear you on that, very much so. We could do a whole 2 hours on just talking about that. Yeah. But we'll remain with the subject at hand, which is balls. One of the questions that I thought would be interesting for our audience to hear you talk about is that, you're such a prolific, you have such a prolific career, and you're doing so much great success with film. And by the way, congratulations on your nomination for American
Fiction. Thank you very
much. I'm curious to know how different your approach is, or if it is different when writing an opera than writing for film or for film.
Well, I mean, every project, whether it be an opera or a film, is very, very are very, very different circumstances. So I think the older I've gotten, the less difference that I have felt. Like, there's not this like, oh, I'm writing a movie and I'm collaborating with other people, so I've got to do this or do that, or I'm doing an opera so I can do my own thing. Because, the truth is the core essence of opera and film are the same, which is what makes good drama, what makes a good story. How can you use that story to communicate something to your audience? So I think that the skills really intersect very, very nicely with each other. I've always been attracted to opera. I grew up as a singer. I grew up singing classical and jazz kind of simultaneously. And when I was at University of Michigan as an undergraduate, we had to declare a principal instrument, and I declared voice. And so it was really nutsy, because since I wasn't going to be a professional, coloratura or soprano, but I learned everything, and like my teachers let me. So I did like Anne Truelove, and I did, Violetta, and then I did these things and I sang them. I could sing pretty well at that time, they let me. So it wasn't like, oh, you shouldn't do this. I did all the Barber songs. I did, French song, everything. And so opera was always attractive to me. And then, as I kind of made the choice at that point, I think one had to make more of a choice. You couldn't do, concert music and film music at the same time. At that point, the concert music world really looked down on film composers. But I decided that film music was a better fit for me, and I'm just so glad that this generation doesn't have those same kind of ridiculous snobberies. But that doesn't really answer your question, does it? It kind of does. I think every project has its own process, and so it depends on what that specific process is for the specific project.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's you give the people you work with, at least from our experience, a lot of creative people, a lot of creative flexibility. Some other directors don't do that.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah,
that's very true. The thing, and I'm asking that to you both, David, and to you, Laura. This idea is that when you do opera, you have the text and you have the voice, and then you have the orchestra. And one of the things that I'm always looking at is, what is the role of the orchestra in this opera? It's obvious, the singer is pretty clear, they have the text, they're telling the story, but what's the involvement of the instruments in that opera? And I'd love you guys to talk about that in terms of both of the works that we're doing. Do you want to start, David?
Sure. I think for me, I'm always thinking about subtext and what, the words are saying one thing, but the music can tell you the truth, if the words are not. And so I think there are a lot of moments where I'm thinking about that kind of duality, and also color, temperature, I think about a lot. You mentioned Atticus before, and I wanted that to feel kind of like a cold house. So there's a repeated, it'll be a vibraphone in this orchestration that's sort of a very distant kind of slow clock, and then these chords that kind of feel kind of still and maybe a little musty. And I feel like I want people to feel like they know the space that he's in, and then the notes that he sings with the words that he sings tell us the truth of who he is and his condition. So I'm thinking temperature, color, all of these different sort of things all at once.
Like almost you don't need a set, because the orchestra is giving you an oral setting of the thing. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. What about you, Laura?
I think, again, it's really contingent on what material I'm working with. For this particular piece, I wanted the orchestra to sound like a marching band. So there were no strings in the original sort of workshop that we did for this for the industry, which is where I worked on the first 15 minutes of this as far as their program for new works. And then we made a couple of changes because now, we're paired together. And so I wanted to use some of the things that David had. But I think for me, it in this piece, it was really, I wanted to certainly give the flavor of being at a stadium, at a sporting event, with the use of the orchestra. I think, as David said, I think the orchestra can really create subtext. I think in this case, it wasn't a separate subtext as you describe it, but more of a kind of stylistic change. You know, there are a lot of styles that happen in my opera. You have, you know, kind of the 70s thing that's going on. You've got the Marilyn, who was Billie Jean's lover. And so she's very jazzy, and so it's got that kind of a vibe. There's a lot of rhythmic work and samples, that, you know, the actual samples of tennis playing to create a rhythmic background. We're using commercials from the 70s. I'm using like these kind of sampled rewind sounds and things that kind of take you back and forward, and you know, what is the world of the analog of 1973. So I think all of that kind of played in the instrumentation, the orchestration of this piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I was going to ask you to, because the audience doesn't know the extra sounds that you've added to the score that, you know, really complements the orchestra. It's kind of another level of orchestration by getting these concrete sounds coming in and out, those videos, you know, at a time where, when did the original version of Balls was written when again?
God, I don't know. I think 2016, 2017. I'm not exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was earlier than that. Earlier than that. Okay. No. Okay. Because I remember, because for our audience, so when Laura did that first 18 minutes or so for the industry, you had sent a score to me, and I had that score forever, thinking, I like this score. One day I'm going to talk to Laura and I'm going to say, can we make it longer and can we do this? And we finally did.
Yeah.
But I had that score in there. And one of the things that attracted me, because Opera Parallel loves to add, you know, visual and art and things that go outside the orchestral sound world, I thought this is really interesting that she's doing this already in the score. But can you talk about what you've added? Like you mentioned it, but a little bit more details of what is in that score in terms of added ingredients.
Well, you know, there's a whole moment when they start to play that it's, you know, where you literally, I mean, I'm not quite, we're still trying to work out how we're going to do it, but in the original where a laptop plays, you know, I can't quite do it, but the sound of a ball hitting the chord, and it creates like, yeah, exactly. It creates a kind of almost like I don't know, it's kind of a Latin-y rhythm almost. It's just the sound. It's the sound of tennis, but put in rhythm. And of course they sing to that. And then we have a speaking role as well. So there's that in it. And they're all, you know, to sort of give you the flavor of the 70s. And of course the almost inconceivable sexism of that time. We have commercials like the famous Joe Namath commercial with Farrah Fawcett is something that we're using. Again, you know, another sports figure, but and it was something that aired during the match. So, you know, there's kind of history, and then it becomes something that everybody sings along to, and you know, then of course the Virginia Slims, you know, she started the Virginia Slims tour, which was the first all-women's tour, pro tour. Right. And it was a famous jingle. You know, you've come a long way, baby, to get where you got to today, you know. And so that had to be in it, of course, because it's so sort of iconic and it fits with the idea. So, you know, I pulled from a lot of different sources to create this, but then there are all these kind of other things that happen too, like Susan B. Anthony appears and cheers her on, and you know, her husband is there trying to work through how to navigate having, you know, I mean, he was an incredible feminist, but you know, it was a different time, so all of that plays into it.
Yes. You know, one of the things that you both do that I didn't realize before I studied the score is that you both bring into your short operas musical quotations from other sources. David, can you talk about the musical quotations you use, that you bring in, that you weave into, and then we'll have also the one in Laws?
I love quotation, and I love music, and I love the idea that music talks to other music. And so I feel like I'm often weaving even just sometimes things that no one will hear in some inner voice or some quotation that I will know is there. And it gives me a lot of joy. So in Wicked Sport, the climax of the piece where Hans Sachs wins, I have a big quote from Meistersinger, with new words, and and I just love that it's about this little bird, and this guy who's kind of he's just not the best character prevailing,
Right. It's brilliant the way that you bring him in. It's really wonderful that you have that moment, and it's definitely, every time I look at him setting the score, I smile when I come to that moment. And what about in Balls? There's a great moment too.
Well, the great moment from opera is when Billie Jean comes out to play. They actually brought her out on a litter, so it's like Aida. So obviously there's the quote from Aida. You can't pass that one up.
Yeah, we're actually going to bring Billie on one of those litters. So we'll
great!
So it'll be fun to have that in there. Before we ask question, I wanted to ask you both what's up next for you in your projects. If you want to talk about that a little bit, so people know what to look for in upcoming. What about you, David? What's up with you right now?
So I just turned in final revisions for a new opera monodrama called What Belongs to You, which is based on the Garth Greenwell novel, which I'm very, very excited about. It's for Kareem Suleiman and Alarm Will Sound. We have a very exciting director on board who I can't mention yet, but it'll be announced soon. And that'll be premiering in Virginia, although I think I'm not supposed to say where yet either, but in Virginia in September. And then this project, Black Lodge, that was just nominated for a Grammy, will be in Europe in May. And then it'll be coming to Los Angeles and New York and Sweden next year. So Black Lodge will be on the road for a bit, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that your operas tend to go on the road. It's really lovely that they have many places and people can experience your piece. That's great. What about you, Laura? Well,
I have. The reason why I was up north is that we're just finishing up an incredible gaming experience for the new Apple Vision Pro, which is the new VR set. So we were putting the finishing touches on that. I have another game which I can't announce, a film, and I've optioned the rights to a film called Dance Girl Dance. Dance Girl Dance was it wasn't a musical. It was a movie directed by Dorothy Arzner. Even film people don't know who Dorothy Arzner was. She was the only woman who worked during the golden age of Hollywood. She was an out lesbian, and she directed genre films. Dance Girl Dance starred Maureen O'Hara and Lucille Ball, and we're creating a musical / film of that piece. So I'm really excited about that. And I have another film that's on the horizon too. So, with my life, you never really know what's around the corner. But I'm really excited to have some time to work on Dance Girl Dance. So we're really starting to get into that a little bit.
That's fantastic. I'm going to look it up. Did you say Dorothy Arzner? Is her name?
Arzner. Yeah, she was. She was really extraordinary. She's like Billie Jean. I mean, Billie Jean went out there to be loud and to change things, but Dorothy Arzner was just doing it by she literally was living as a lesbian during the golden age of Hollywood and working, which was unheard of. I mean, it was unheard of to be out as queer, but equally unheard of for a woman to be directing anything. And she invented the boom mic, which is, of course, the mic that's held that does movie production sound, which is still being used now. So it's like she was amazing. So I'm really excited, not only just to musicalize the movie and to create some cool stuff out of it, but also to make people aware of this incredible icon and somebody who's really important to film history and feminist history. And I think it'll be really fun to play in the world of Golden Age Hollywood.
Yeah, there could be an opera written about her.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be that. I mean, it's. I don't know whether you want to call it an opera or a musical theater or a musical film, but it's going to have all of those elements in it. I try not to think about things differently. You know what I mean? Or even to categorize them in strong genres. What's important to me is to kind of do what's right for the piece and then let it tell me what to do stylistically.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we're all realizing, and why I love contemporary opera so much is that there is no longer these divisions that this is opera, this is musical theater, this is this and that, and that we're creating hybrid new forms that are pretty much redefining those words, and that's all dramatic musical theater in many ways. I like that idea a lot.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
But sure you can.
Well, just for Laura, because we were both at Michigan, and I'm curious, did you encounter William Bolcom when you were in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, I studied with him.
See, I was wondering, and you were talking about genre, because I studied with him also. And I feel like a lot of this sort of idea of openness of genre and communicativeness of genre, I feel in a lot of his cabaret songs and work. So
that's interesting because our artistic administrator Jacques Desjardins, who's also a composer, also studied with Bolcom.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what were you going to say, Laura?
No, he was. I mean, see, here's the funny thing: is that Bolcom was like that, but the truth is, Milton Babbitt was like that too.
True.
And so people think about Milton as being this kind of completely esoteric, like ivory tower guy, but he trained Stephen Sondheim, and and his music, if you get through kind of the surface texture of it, is super jazzy. If you put on a Milton Babbitt record, if you put on his piano pieces or some of the vocal works, and you say, okay, I'm going to think about this like jazz, and you just put that through your brain, then you can hear it. So I think, but definitely Bill Bolcom was somebody who like played with genre a lot within a relatively narrow circle. But I mean, he did like Joe Micklin Silver's films, he did film scores, and his wife, of course, is a terrific singer, was one of the great cabaret singers, and so they created and performed works together, and he did like ragtime, contemporary rag, and all of that. So he was embraced his eclecticism, I think. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
That's great.
It's interesting because jazz in general, I know that one of the things is, I know for myself, when I'm studying a score that is not new music, I try to study it like if it was new music, and that really helps me to find things that are worth giving another interpretation to the piece. But I also think that I'm a huge fan of jazz, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of jazz composers, and it's taught me so much about how to look at textures, how to look at how you move in the score and that. And I do think that a lot of composers, when you start to look at their compositional style, have jazz influence in there, if you can look at it in that way, and that. I don't know if there are questions. Daniel, are you seeing hands, or
one that
shall I
I'm
go on?
seeing right now? No.
Everyone's very quiet about this. Okay. I'm going to ask then, Laura, we talked a little bit before you were there about David shared with us how he works with his librettist. Tell us how you work when you write, when you do a piece that has a librettist. Do you have them write first the whole thing? How do you collaborate?
I mean, this one was a little bit unusual. First, normally, I'll work with somebody, someone will throw out kind of ideas for lyrics. And then, as David said, I will definitely work with those lyrics and, say, oh my God, I need another word here. I need another syllable to complete a phrase. With this one, I mean, originally I went to Gail Collins, who is an opinion columnist in the New York Times, mostly because I really liked her sense of humor. I liked her political writing, and she wrote a book basically about American women, but certainly Billie Jean King was in it. And so what Gail did was do an outline and then write kind of almost like ideas for what a song could be, but she'd never done anything narrative. And so it was up to me to kind of take that stuff and adapt it into something that was singable and workable. And then for this piece, I went back, I got a transcript. It was so great because, the movie The Battle of the Sexes was made, and the filmmakers had made an entire transcript of the match, which I was able to get a hold of. And so a lot of it was me adapting, especially from the new stuff that is premiering with you next month, or I guess it's almost next month. I mean, it actually February 29th is, I see my birthday's tomorrow, so I consider today my birthday, the extra day for me to wait. But so I adapted a lot of the from the language from the actual match, quite a bit of it for the second two sort of pieces or act. The opera is organized in terms of, tennis she won in 3 sets, so the opera is really in 3 sets.
Yeah, that makes sense. But generally, would you have the librettist write the whole libretto and then work with her or them or he, or would you compose like beside each other on that? There are different ways of dealing with working together, composer librettist. What do you prefer in your other operas?
I guess, I mean, when I've worked with Kelly Rourke, who's, very much like Royce, like a really like pro librettist, she'll give me a draft of something and I'll take a look at it and see what speaks to me. And then we massage it quite extensively.
Yeah, on that. I'm going to turn to another question because, you guys are, you write this very rhythmical music, you write this very, earthy sounds and that, but I'm impressed in both. And I started to talk about that with David, but we didn't finish about the idea of melody. And both of these pieces that we're doing of yours have moments where, oh my God, this melody is so deep and brings me to such a different emotion all of a sudden. And how does melody come to you when you're writing? And let's start with David. We had been talking about Atticus, your last area, but there are many others. There are a lot in your piece. So yeah,
this piece has a lot of tunes.
Great melody. Yeah.
I look at the text and I kind of try to sing it and feel like what it feels like to sing it, even if it's not, I'm not singing the exact notes, it's sort of contours or it's sort of a gesture that's toward, I really want this word to be really important, so I'll lean toward it in a line. It's, composing for me it's a little bit of an out of body experience when I'm really in it. So it's hard to say like, first I do this, then I do this, then I do this with the actual writing. But I know it always starts with me vocalizing and sort of trying to imagine what it will feel like for the singer to sing it. Because I want it to feel good for them to sing. I think thinking about the voice is like always in my mind. And then I also think of style. I mean, I'll think of like, what would a quote unquote untrained singer sing in a way that feels natural, and I will try to lean toward that as well, as opposed to saying I'm going to compose this line that is going to be so smart, but what feels good to sing. So yeah, and it's kind of it's really very organic and intuitive in a way. And you mentioned this Atticus moment, and there's I just want to mention David Ives, the playwright, because I feel like the structure of Biggest Word is owes a lot to his collection of plays, All in the Timing, which are studies in comic timing, and many of them have this form where it's like funny, 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 oh sad, or oh moving, or and it's this sort of twist at the end, which is very much how Biggest Word is structured. And I was involved in a production of that in college, so it just stuck with me that form works really well.
Yeah, it's a great. It has great impact in that way. What about you, Laura?
Honestly, the dirty little secret is that I sit at my computer, I have a microphone, and I have my orchestra set up in my digital audio workstation, and I sing in every line. And then I rework it if I need to. And sometimes it sounds pretty good if it's in my register, and sometimes it sounds absolutely horrific if it's not, but I sing every line. And I kind of start at the top and go down. Sometimes I'll start at the bottom and go up, but I find that that's what works for me. And that's, obviously, I mean, as David said, and it's so true, I mean, the words, the prosody of the text certainly sets out what I think is probably a fairly obvious rhythm. I think that when something is singable and understandable, the words create a rhythm. And then the real balance comes in is, how does it soar? How much repetition do you need? When you've got something that's really great, do you want to just keep doing it? And there's a moment, I mean, there are two things that I love like a lot in this opera. And one of them is when Marilyn is singing to Billy. There's a moment when I wrote that, I realized that I just had not heard two women sing to each other like that in an opera. And she sings, we will live in a big house in Malibu, we two. I think of you, think of you, think of you, ah, baby. A song in brown, a song in blue. Anyway, it goes like that. And so it's like sexy, and I wanted to do that. And the other one, which is something that I feel like many of us have experienced in our lives, and it's a line that Gail wrote, which I love, is Bobby sings at first, "I've underestimated you," and then she sings, "You underestimated me," and then the boys come in, I can't remember, another dollar, another day, this is the American way, and so it's like it's almost like completely obvious, how that music is going to sound, like you've underestimated me. You've underestimated me. You almost just speak it and the melody comes. If you've underestimated me. You've underestimated me. So that's how all of this can be really understandable and also have, I think, emotional power. I think actually from writing film scores, I've become a better melodist because in film, you don't have time to beat around the bush. You got to get to the point immediately musically, and you've got to really understand what the music needs to be doing, when it needs to be doing that, and how it's going to be doing that. And so I think I've learned to be sort of succinct in my ideas that way, and I think it benefits me as an opera composer as well.
Oh, I totally agree with you on that. Instead of ramping forever to get to the tension, you have to get there. No, I totally agree with you. And that, in that way, we haven't spoken about it, but I think writing effective shorter operas are much more difficult than if you writing a 2-hour opera where you sort of, to have the impact in 40 minutes, like both of these operas have, or 45 minutes, is very different. Do we have other questions? Here I am talking the whole time. I would have liked to engage. Hello, Brian.
Hi.
Yes.
This has been great conversation. So, Laura, that all makes sense to me now, because I wrote Laura a note saying how wonderful her recording is. So,
oh my God, it was terrible.
makes the recording of everybody's. I mean, I wish I could put this on the web, but I promise I won't.
No,
But
don't.
of everybody's voices, we're talking Howard Cosell, Susan B. Anthony, the lover, the husband, and there's a moment where she's singing "Every point makes a point, every point makes a point," which is one of my favorite moments in the thing because of the way you texture it. But now I get it. You were a singer, and I can totally see you singing to the orchestra, making these melodies. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. When we received that recording of yours, actually, Daniel said, "Is it Laura singing all these things?" I said, "I think so."
I loved it.
So yes, it was great. It's great.
John,
So
I think there's a question from
John.
John.
Yeah, the question. Oh yes.
Hi, Laura, I wanted to ask you, as you and Gail were writing the work back in 2017, did you have a conversation at some point with Billie Jean King? And what happened in that conversation with her over the creation of the piece? And secondly, I wanted to ask David Little, did you ever take Vinkensport to the Netherlands, to Belgium? Because your works are always on tour, seemingly. And I'm just curious, did you ever play the home country of the Flemish territories?
I wish I had a conversation with her. I would love to meet her. I've kind of tried to a few times, but no, I have not, been in touch with her. I'd sort of secretly hoped that Gail might make that happen, but didn't. And so I didn't push it.
Rosie Casal is going to be coming, I think, to the performances.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. Yeah.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
She's got a big part,
Yeah, she does. She does.
That's neat.
Vinkensport has not yet premiered in the Netherlands, although we came very close to an outdoor performance happening at a festival, which I think would have been really fun to sort of stage it as if it were actually happening, and then have people just start singing. But we couldn't quite make it work for. I think at that point it was a funding issue or something. But we're still trying. It'll get over there. I have faith.
Have you had any feedback from or people that actually played Vinkensport? Have you connected with them?
I've actually haven't met any. I would love to. I would love to.
Yeah.
I hope they know it's done with love.
Right. Absolutely.
I think we've reached out. We've reached out to some people in San Francisco, right? That play.
No, we tried to see if there was, a Vinkensport league of some description in the US. none that have surfaced so far. But I believe we were in touch with the Belgian embassy, consulate, and
cool
thing on that level. But still trying to track down the elusive Vinkensport league.
I will say there was one incident many years ago. The piece was on Vox at New York City Opera, 2010 or 11 maybe. And there's a scene where one of the Finches dies. Not to spoiler alert, one of the Finches dies, and this character flushes them down a toilet, which of course you would not do with a Finch, which I think is why it's funny, because it's not a goldfish, right? This is the whole idea. And somebody in the audience was very offended by this and very upset that we would mistreat this bird and said, "Birds are so beautiful. Why would you do this?" And I was about to answer, and the moderator was like, No. Next question. Just sort of shut up. So a little bit of controversy, but.
All right.
Well, I see that we are at time. I don't know if there are other questions, but I'll pass the baton back to Daniel here.
Thank you so much. We're running up on time, so I wanted to give the last couple of little plugs for some upcoming things related to Birds and Bulls. First of all, we have a wonderful collection of resources and videos and readings, articles, or related to the different themes that are in this opera that are on our website called that we call Enhance Your Experience. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now for that. And this is the same link, which is where you can buy your tickets for the show, which is coming up on April 5 to 7, this coming April, for 4 performances at SF Jazz. So also on that link, you'll see a registration section for the open rehearsal that we'll be holding for the production, which is on March 23rd, from 1 to 2 p.m., which is a Saturday. And that's at a venue called 42nd Street Moon in San Francisco. That's a rehearsal venue. All the information's on the website, and you can register there to come along for that as well. Yeah, so we'll see you
Wait,
at the performances.
can I ask a question?
Please.
So I'm looking at my calendar. I think I might. Wait, hold on. Yeah, I'm going to be up there because they're doing Ask Your Mom at the Berkeley Symphony that night, at least a good part of it, on the 23rd.
Great.
So send me that information and I'll come around. I'll fly up in the morning and come by.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
I'll be up there anyway.
Yeah.
It's
that's
literally
great.
a block away from the symphony, so you'll be
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, I wanted to take a second to thank you both. I know how busy you are, and just to take the time to share and just to have that connection with some of our audience. And we'll be recording this, so if you know of people that would enjoy listening to it before coming, you can hear it. But thank you. It just shows again how generous artists you are, and we really appreciate it very much.
Operas are they're so wonderful together, and we are so excited to be doing them. So thank you both for the beautiful pieces.
And we're just grateful to you guys for doing this. I mean, it's really a leap of faith to do these kinds of works, and I'm very, very appreciative. And now I'm really excited, even more so that Rosie Casals is coming. That's like I may have. Super cool. Thank you for making that
that's
happen.
pretty cool. Yeah, we're trying to make it happen. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful night. And
Lots
we'll
of
see you
love.
soon, I hope. Yes. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.